Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Grandpappy the Pirate and Cephalopod Lodge. I suppose a connecting thread between these episodes is that we're introduced to characters of the same species as our main characters, so another crab and more octopi. Yeah, great connecting thread we have here. Alright, I'll move on now. As always, thank you for watching today's video. I appreciate y'all very, very much. And now, let's just get right into it. Grandpappy the Pirate. Just going off of that title, sounds like we've got an episode about Mr. Krabs being a pirate on our hands. Count me in! I love this aspect of Mr. Krabs' character a lot, the sailor and or pirate aspect of him, so I'm already a fan of this episode's concept. And I love the idea of exploring characters' families, just like how Season 5 really delved into SpongeBob's family quite a bit. Grandpappy the Pirate has the basic plot of lying to your parents/family in order to impress them. I have never been this kind of plot's biggest fan. Really, any kind of plot where a character is lying to another character in order to impress them, and like where it's an actual plot and not just a joke, is not something I usually enjoy. And that's because it usually gets too close to the secondhand embarrassment that I hate, because you just know that everything is going to come crashing down and the liar or embellisher will have to come clean. It's a staple of the plot. And that just makes me cringe. And also, I don't mind predictability, but since I don't like the way this plot goes, its predictability is to its detriment since I spend the whole plot with at least a kernel of that dread in the back of my mind. I don't like sitting there knowing that everything is going to go to hell in a handbasket. I know it's supposed to build suspense and tension and a feeling of curiosity about just how things will go wrong, but that's just not a pleasant experience for me. I don't know, maybe I'm weird. Wouldn't be the first time I've had an unpopular opinion about something, and it most certainly won't be the last. But all of this semi-tangent is to say that Grandpappy the Pirate begins with an immediate disadvantage, but not anything insurmountable. And the episode makes sure not to linger too much in its disadvantage because its setup is rather fun, or at least funny in that I just love how this show completely disregards continuity and internal consistency. Like, how many backstories have we had for the Krusty Krab now? I think it's fun to piece together all of the clearly conflicting backstories just to try and somehow make them all work. And my personal canon for the show is that everything always happens no matter what, because time works differently here. But ignoring that, my favorite backstory for the Krusty Krab is the one presented in Krusty Krab training video, along with elements of Friend or Foe. Just thought I'd mention this, even though this is also irrelevant to my actual thoughts on the episode. Okay, I promise I'll give you what you came for now. So, Grandpappy the Pirate reminds me very much of Squilliam Returns, which makes sense because they have the same basic premise at the very base level. And that's not a bad thing. Though I do wish they had changed up the characters instead of just using the core four again. Like, imagine if Sandy came up in here like a pirate. Guess we'll have to wait till pull up a barrel for that one. Anyway, I love everyone's little pirate outfits here. They're so cute, especially SpongeBob's. I love whenever the characters get to wear different outfits. It's like a little treat since it doesn't happen very often. After a while, we finally get to see Grandpa Redbeard, in the flesh and not flashback form, of course. And you know what? I like him. Dennis Quaid did a good job in voicing him. And the way that everyone works to try and fool him is certainly interesting, because how do he not realize that the boat is not moving? I mean, we know why, cartoon logic, but y'all should know by now that I keep finding myself quote-unquote surprised by this show's illogic. This whole scene is a bit slow, though I understand that it was done like this to show how horrible the ruse is. However, as I say over and over again, just because I know why something was done the way it was doesn't automatically make it good or funny. And this scene didn't have to be not funny the way it was. There's not very many jokes during these few minutes, which makes things quickly start moving towards Dolesville. I'm at least entertained though, so that helps. And I like how when Grandpa Redbeard takes charge, Squidward literally doesn't care. Moving on, when Pearl makes her appearance, my feelings are conflicted. I don't think I really like the joke with Grandpa Redbeard and an unknowing Mr. Krabs insulting Pearl in this way, and I also just don't understand why Mr. Krabs couldn't just say that Pearl is his daughter, or, include her in the plan in the first place, which would have helped with what I said earlier about the show repeatedly using the same four characters, but whatever. I'm at least glad that she's even here in the first place, for the little bit that she is. It is during this scene that Grandpa Redbeard finds out about the lies that Mr. Krabs has been telling, so that's fun, and I love how after the kinda too long build-up, Mr. Krabs just completely loses it and destroys everything. Like, that was entertaining. And the ending of this episode is great as well. I love how Grandpa Redbeard is proud of Mr. Krabs in the end because of the way Mr. Krabs essentially commits highway robbery with his restaurant. Considering that it appears to be a trait of crabs to be cheap and money hungry, this makes sense to me. Mr. Krabs is a robber baron of a different kind. And then I really like how Grandpa Redbeard ends up stealing Mr. Krabs' money. That was a great ending for this episode. Oh, and then I wanted to get into one little tangent before I wrap things up. So while I was comparing the designs of Mr. Krabs and Grandpa Redbeard, and as I was noting the deeper red of Redbeard and how I found it to be much more appealing than Mr. Krabs' relatively light, washed out red, I started to be like, wait a minute, didn't Mr. Krabs used to be a much deeper red? And so I looked, and it's true, he was a deeper red in older episodes, and even in newer episodes his deeper red color has returned. So I'm not sure if this was a problem for this era of episodes or not. Like, for example, in a few episodes during Squid's visit, he'll be a deep red again. So I don't know if it was just this episode that had this coloring error with him. This episode also questionably colored SpongeBob, who doesn't seem as vibrant as he usually is. Has anyone else noticed this? I wonder what's up with this. Alright, well anyway, let me sum up this episode. Grandpappy the Pirate is a good and decent episode, generally speaking. I feel like it missed some opportunities to be much funnier and more interesting than it was, but I am happy with what we got to. The episode was also not particularly funny, and that one scene with the ruse did leave this episode approaching boring, but not for long, and it didn't get there either. I really do wish we'd just abandoned this slow shit already. Like, season 1 was the only season of the show to use slowness effectively, and while season 6 appears to be trying, for whatever reason, it's not working. Time to let it go, man. But all of this is why this episode is being placed in my good tier, where it comes in with a score of 7.1 out of 10. Well, look at what we've got here today. It's Cephalopod Lodge! One of those episodes that used to be much more infamous, Cephalopod Lodge seems to have had opinions about it mellow out in recent years. At least that's how I feel, since I never hear much about this episode anymore. And that's good, because I've always liked this episode, even when I pretended like I didn't. But now there's no need for pretense, because I'm an adult, and I don't feel like I need to try and fit in with popular opinion anymore like I did when I was a kid. Guess that just goes to show what happens when you age and start distancing yourself from certain parts of the fandom. And that goes for any fandom, I think. Alright, let me get started now. So firstly, I like the title of this episode. It just rolls off the tongue nicely, and I can always appreciate a nice sounding title, and as we roll right into this beginning section, I quite like it. This first minute or so sets up a nice air of intrigue as Squidward acts so differently to his normal self, with that big-ass smile on his face, and I love how this unsettles both SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs, which, yeah, I get that, because if you've even seen a single frame of this show, you'd know that something ain't right here with Squidward looking this damn happy. Also, SpongeBob bothering Mr. Krabs about this while the guy is making a coin replica of himself is pretty funny. But anyway, so we watch as Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob bear witness to a shady-looking dude in a trench coat coming up to Squidward talking about some tonight is the big night. It's giving drug sale. Maybe that's why Squidward is so happy. Yep, I think I've cracked the code, everyone. Mystery over. Okay, but seriously, this first minute or so is just a really good setup for Cephalopod Lodge. Like, these goings-on makes us curious immediately, which is a great way to draw viewers in. And so now, with the mystery getting more intense as Squidward sneaks out of his house in the middle of the night, the question becomes, will the episode deliver on this promising premise? Well, let's find out. The first answer we get to this question is not one that inspires a lot of confidence, unfortunately, because when we do start this nighttime scene, we run into my first issue with Cephalopod Lodge, which is the choice of characters. Season 6 appears to have a problem with limiting characters severely, not just what characters show up, but when they show up as well. For example, Mr. Krabs, in this season he only appears when the Krusty Krab is involved in a major capacity. The only time that this doesn't happen, so far at least, we still have more season 6 episodes to go, is in Penny Foolish, but even that episode takes place at the Krusty Krab for a significant portion. However, I still count this episode because Mr. Krabs' motivations aren't solely or even largely Krusty Krab related. But anyway, this character limiting of season 6 means that we see far fewer varied character dynamics, which can get, I don't want to say stale, but that's not necessarily true, but it does make it more likely that an episode can be stale, I suppose. To bring things back to Cephalopod Lodge, the way that this limited character problem presents itself in this episode for me is the choice to get rid of Mr. Krabs for literally no reason. Like, we start the episode with SpongeBob, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs, but after the first scene, Mr. Krabs is gone and Patrick takes his place. Literally, why? This just ends up making this episode more similar to Good Neighbors than it needs to be, even though I feel like it's potentially an homage to Club SpongeBob. But anyway, just like I said a few minutes ago about Grandpappy the Pirate with Sandy, I think it would have been more fun to have Mr. Krabs here than Patrick. And imagine how silly the disguise outfit would have looked on him. I'm telling you, we were robbed. Finally, moving on, we see Squidward go to the Illuminati headquarters, the Cephalopod Lodge. One thing I really like in this episode are the designs of the squids and octopuses, or maybe they're all octopuses, who knows. I'll just call them the cephalopods. Anyway, the little bit we get to see of what the lodge is like is entertaining, and then of course SpongeBob and Patrick show up out of nowhere, which ends up getting Squidward kicked out because these people are secretive and racist. Speciesist, I guess. Just like the squids in Squidville, now that I think about it. I'm starting to think Squidward is a bit of a racist himself. Also, since I'm already saying random bullshit, now that I'm thinking about it, this situation is like a kid-friendly version of what would have happened to Hisoka if Gon wasn't able to recover from saying his name when they were captured by the Phantom Troop. Not sure how many Hunter x Hunter fans watch my channel, but yes, I like Hunter x Hunter. This is the first time I've ever referenced that. I should rewatch it. Yeah, this is a full-on tangent now. Oops. I'll make sure to put the sticker up for my running bit. Okay, back to the episode now. Once everyone gets kicked out of the lodge, the back and forth between Squidward and SpongeBob especially is pretty entertaining for me, and I really found the whole "at least you still have XYZ" part to be pretty funny. I also like how SpongeBob and Patrick try to explain the situation to the lodge so that Squidward can get reinstated. That's pretty nice of them. And this scene is fucking hilarious to me because of how unreasonable the door guard Roger is. Like, the entire part where Roger's like, well, if it's not your fault and it's not Squidward's fault, whose fault is it? And Patrick's like, well, maybe it's your fault. It's just comedy gold just from the deliveries alone. And also, Patrick is right. Like, how did SpongeBob and Patrick get in if Roger was supposed to be guarding the door, Exactly. After this failed attempt at getting Squidward back into the lodge, Cephalopod Lodge takes a page from the books of Club SpongeBob and Good Neighbors, with the Conch Street trio forming their own club, as I'd alluded to earlier. I like how in this case the club was formed to make Squidward feel better, which is pretty wholesome. And I thought the bit with the patty cake was pretty funny, particularly the "we don't use our pinkies" bit because of how silly it was. I love how from there, the episode then takes a turn with SpongeBob and Patrick literally kidnapping Squidward. Like, this episode truly keeps you on your toes. The way Squidward says, "Are you insane?" is just a perfect line delivery to me. Roger Bumpus does it again. This initiation scene is pretty entertaining to me, and although it gets dangerously close to lasting too long, I don't think it ever actually crosses that line, and the wide shot of Squidward screaming is great. Cephalopod Lodge continues to do a great job at being so completely random and bizarre during its last few minutes, just starting with the costumes that SpongeBob and Patrick make for their club. Chickens? What the hell, sure, why not? And I love how Patrick basically threatens violence against the people who took the better club name. But what I really, really love is the turn that this episode makes when SpongeBob and Patrick plot to get Squidward back into the lodge. My first inclination was to be like, I wish the whole episode was like this, but on second thought, I think that it's good that this episode's plot wasn't entirely about getting Squidward back into the lodge, but had these few minutes of making a second club too. It keeps things varied and interesting, and I think this makes the last segment so much better. I love how it's SpongeBob who comes up with the idea here too. The giant live-action sock is another great bit of random absurdity that I love from this episode, and when SpongeBob is talking through the sock, the hand motions make me laugh so hard. I love when this episode just incorporates random live-action shit, like it always works. The whole scene with the eel chasing members of the lodge is so great, very Scooby-Doo, and I like that the plan works and Squidward is reinstated. But surprisingly, I like even more that in the end, SpongeBob and Patrick get Squidward kicked out once again, and I love how the episode ends with the return of the jellyfish initiation. Just a really funny ending to this great episode. Now, let me address the infamy of this episode. I know the biggest critique of Cephalopod Lodge is that it counts as a Squidward torture porn episode. Y'all already know I don't fuck with that name. I've explained it many times over by now, most recently in my review of Boating Buddies, so I'm not gonna retread that old ground. Instead, I'll just say that similar to Choir Boys, Cephalopod Lodge barely even meets that term's standards. Like, this is not a very torturous episode for Squidward whatsoever. It's more that he doesn't get what he wants. Other than the jellyfish and his crying session, he doesn't go through bodily or emotional torment. So the fact that this episode became infamous because of that annoying ass term is now even more irritating because it barely applies here. And everything Squidward goes through in this episode is meant to be funny, and to me it is funny. So that's good for me at least. Cephalopod Lodge is a really great episode, and I'm somewhat surprised that reviewers had such strongly negative opinions about this episode, because for me at least, there's really not much for me to dislike. Like, I see why the criticism happened, but I don't think it makes much sense. Anyway, for me personally, this episode was hilarious, and frankly, because the Lodge looks like a racist cult, SpongeBob and Patrick did Squidward a favor by getting him up and out of there. The episode is generally just super entertaining and funny, and it's got some wholesome moments in there as well, with SpongeBob and Patrick trying to get Squidward back into the lodge so that he'll be happy. All things considered, Patrick's role is minor in this episode, but he serves his role well, providing some good humor throughout the episode, so he doesn't feel wholly unnecessary, and while I still don't like that Mr. Krabs was written out, Patrick's appearance was certainly justified. All of this together is why I'm putting this episode in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.1 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. I've got like 3 different ones about Cephalopod Lodge, so let me think for a second as to whether I can come up with anything for Grandpappy the Pirate. Y'all know I hate when things are unbalanced. And frankly, the only thing I can think there is that it's weird that Grandpa Redbeard was called Grandpa, but the title of the episode is Grandpappy. I know it's because Grandpappy sounds better for a title, but they could have just kept that as his address. Whatever. Also, because Cephalopod Lodge has made me think of racist cults, I have to wonder if Mr. Krabs didn't tell Grandpa Redbeard about Pearl because... No, it can't be that, right? Right? Well, anyway. So, Cephalopod Lodge. Another infamous episode of Season 6 has come and gone, and what have I learned? Well, I feel like what I've learned is that a lot of people over-exaggerate shit, which makes sense. It's like a game of telephone. Someone dislikes an episode, then people take that opinion, and it influences their own dislike of the episode, and soon the feelings start getting stronger and more intense, and now the episode is infamous. That's a very simple way of looking at it, but I believe that this is the case for most of the infamous episodes of this show, especially the ones that nowadays are looked upon more fondly. For episodes like One Course Meal or A Pal for Gary, it's a little different, I think. You know, the other day I was thinking about how it's been just about, 10 years now, probably between, 10 and 12, since I was heavily into the cartoon reviewing scene that made episodes like Cephalopod Lodge infamous. Weird to think about. Firstly, it's weird to think of having clear memories of 10 years ago, especially when they don't feel that long ago at all. But also, dang, I've been a part of the SpongeBob fandom space for a long time now. Yeah, I've watched the show for basically my whole life, but being in the fandom space is different. Also, can you believe it's been 10 years since Sponge Out of Water? God, it's been 10 years since Resurrection F and Dragon Ball Super. Someone hold me. Somebody in my comments the other day, I think it was Sturtle Dude Awesome, brought up a new term that he uses when talking about certain Squidward episodes, Squidward Gets Bothered episodes. I like that term. Much more accurate and reasonable description of an episode and why it bothers someone than Squidward torture porn. Maybe I could use this term too. But also, even Squidward Gets Bothered episodes wouldn't annoy me for the most part, so I wouldn't have any reason to use this term. But I'll keep it in mind, I think. And I think that's all I've got for y'all today. I actually had a decent amount of closing thoughts for once. I guess it was just a good day writing this script. But anyway, that means that I'll be ending the video now, and I'll see y'all in the next review.